Welcome to Around the Farm. I'm Steve Gregerson here with Site Director Andy Height, and we're going to take you around the farm here in December.
But we're going to stay inside today because it's a little cool.
Yeah, and foggy.
Might
yeah. Get lost.
You found your way out here, though.
I did. Fortunately, Joe's car being a bright color,
that helped.
Led me right down the path.
When I came in this morning, it was really foggy.
I can imagine.
Well, yeah, it's December. We've in a lot of ways, in terms of programs, we've wrapped up our season. We had our Christmas event last weekend, very well attended. Weather was good, although it really seemed funny for December to have almost shirt-sleeve weather for Christmas on the farm.
That was a little strange.
But you know, we'll be getting ready now to think ahead into, because really it won't be long until April, and so we'll be getting ready for another year.
Another round of the yellow troop carriers.
Yellow troop carriers will be here.
All the little troops getting off of them and coming down. And
but for now, we're kind of into winter mode. And you know, one of the things people a lot of times will ask is, well, what do you do out there in the wintertime? And you know, that's the time when we do a lot of maintenance projects that we can't do during the year, some painting and some things like that. So again, and the other big thing is to get our equipment ready to because with April comes grass mowing season again. So
yes, I came past the garage up there today, and I noticed Rob had the power washer out, and I thought, whoa, a power washer out in December,
that doesn't happen too often.
A little unusual, but getting things ready to roll and tuned up and all that good stuff, cleaned up and all that good stuff.
So that's a lot of our winter is just getting ready for the spring, and we'll be ready to go.
Sounds good. Here's a thought I was having. Was my mind wanders around. It sometimes wanders off. And
did you write it down?
I didn't, so it's what I remembered. What would it have been like to live at the farm when John Johnson and the family lived here in the wintertime?
Well, that's a pretty good question, and you know, we get asked that, especially for our Christmas event. We get asked that a lot. You know, what was it like for the family? And you know, we're so used to, you know, having central heat and all that sort of thing, and it's hard for us maybe to wrap our mind around what it would have been like as the family lived here. You know, one of the things that I've thought about a lot of times when we're out here, when it is cold and snowy and the snow's drifted up to our knees, and you think, you know, what would have been like for the family to live out here, because, you know, we've got snow plows, we've got snow blowers and all that equipment that, you know, makes moving the snow relatively easy, you know, compared to what that family would have had to have dealt with. And it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around, I think, sometimes, you know, just movement. What would it have been like to get from place to place? I know one winter when we still lived out here in the site house, it was a winter where it had drifted up so bad we couldn't get equipment back to the barn, and you know, you have to get back to the barn to feed every day. And so I was walking across the field, and you know, that helped to get a real appreciation for what the family had to deal with, because you know, from the barn to the shop doesn't look like it's all that far. You know, when there's about 2 feet of snow in there and there's drifts here and there, that's a long ways. And I thought, well, gee, I'm walking in a straight line until the next morning when the sun come up, and I said, boy, I didn't walk in a straight line at all. So, you know, that would have been a challenge. And, you know, with animals on the farm, because he had hogs, he had sheep, you know, he had the animals you would think about on a farm at that time. You know, they would have needed care. So, you know, he would have had, you know, he or the family would have had to deal with that all the time. So it would have been, living on the farm would have been a challenge. And, you know, then when we go into the farmhouse, you know, we've got storm windows in there, and it's, you know, we've got it buttoned up, and we've got the chimneys, all the chimneys but one
nice
capped.
Central heating now.
And central heating now, and, you know, it's relatively comfortable. But, you know, I think when the family lived here with 7 fireplaces,
wow.
You know, you think about, you know, when you burn the fireplace, They really look nice.
Oh, they look beautiful.
But an open fireplace is not a real heat source. It sucks the heat right up the...
Exactly.
So, if the family was lucky, they might have gotten house up to maybe 45 degrees. And, now to us, that seems extremely cold. And we'd be calling the furnace guy. But, for the family at that point, that would have been probably a luxury. Of course, now they did some things to deal with that heat too, or that lack of heat. One of the things that they had were wing-back chairs.
Right.
And those chairs in the wintertime were sort of a necessity if you sat for any length of time, because those chairs would have been turned to face the fireplace, so that as you're sitting there, probably just about in the fireplace, but that chair would help hold the heat in. It helped keep you warm. So, you see wing-back chairs, and, today they're a fashion statement because they
Right.
look nice. But at that point, they were sort of a necessity.
Kind of kept the draft too, didn't it?
Yeah, it would have kept the draft away from you a little bit, because if you're facing the fireplace and that fireplace is sucking the heat out, it would keep the draft from around you so much. So that would be the other thing you gain from that. Other thing that, when you go, if people visit the Johnston Farm or visit period houses from that same time, you see a lot of the canopy beds. Mm-hmm. And, we buy those today, say, boy, those really look nice. Or you buy the big 4-poster bed for your bedroom. You think, wow, we're making a real fashion statement, or, whatever you want to call it. Again, that would have been something during the Johnston era, both in the summer and the winter, that would have been a necessity. Because in the wintertime, they take those canopy beds and they drape heavy curtains around them. So you maintain some warmth inside that curtain. So, that's another way that, they would have dealt with the winter. So it would have been much more of a challenge than what we think about. But again, if you put it back 200 years, well, that was luxurious. That was like our central heat to those folks. But, we do get that question asked a lot. What would it have been like? And, the other thing I think people start to get a sense of, too, when they come out to our Christmas event, we light the candles. We have lamps going. And, it's not like what we're used to today. We've got nice lights going on in here, and it's
Exactly.
like daylight in here.
Oh yeah, I mean it's not dark, but you're certainly there's not an abundance of being able to see where you're going and see what you're doing and things like that. So.
Well, and depending on what kind of light source you have, if you have a beeswax candle, they burn fairly clean and they don't smell bad. But if you've got a candle that's made out of animal fat,
Yep.
they stink. They don't burn clean. So, you get that. And at that point, you start to see oil lamps coming in, are starting to come into homes in Ohio at the time that Johnston's would have been here. And I'm sure you remember, when I grew up as a kid, we had kerosene lamps that we would burn when the power went out. Remember how smelly the kerosene lamp was?
They were awful.
Now we use, we buy lamp oil that's colored and scented and all that sort of, and you don't have that issue. But, they would have been probably started with kerosene or whale oil.
Yes.
And the whale oil would have burned a little bit cleaner. But, light sources and heat sources were so much different. So, and you've been out there. You've been doing your thespian thing.
Yes, that's true.
Out there with the with the lights, so it is a lot different.
Oh yeah, much. You really step back in time, so to speak, and it's kind of hard to wrap your head around all that. That you think, well, you adapted to what was there. I mean, you didn't have any choice, and And
Well, and the still that other side of the coin is they didn't know any different.
right, exactly.
That was what they were used to.
Exactly.
So that makes a big difference for people, and it's hard. Those are things it's hard for us to think about today.
Exactly.
How much different it would have been. So
Exactly.
big question we get asked a lot. Of course, then in the summer we get asked the same thing because if it's hot out, you open windows and you get some relief, but the season would have been a lot different for the family.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I can't really, it's really hard to begin to imagine all seasons, what it would have been like in the house. I mean, to come in there and look today and with lighting and heat and air conditioning and everything, it's just, I don't know if you get a real, true picture of what it would have been. Not that I'd want to go back and try it, but certainly kind of makes you wonder sometimes that how tough that would have been. I don't know how well I'd have survived in a situation like that, but
I think people were a lot hardier.
Right.
But I guess it goes back to the fact this is what they were used to.
Yeah, exactly.
In the summertime, if something happens that one of the air conditioning units isn't functioning properly in the house, first thing we hear from visitors, oh my, it's hot in here. Well, welcome to 200 years ago. And we don't have the windows that we can open and bring what breeze you capture, and that would be the other thing that would happen with for example, with the canopy beds. In the summertime, then those beds, instead of being draped with heavy curtains, would be draped with fabrics like cheesecloth that would let the breeze in but keep the bugs out.
Right.
And two, a lot of times people thought that that evening air wasn't healthy for you, which it was cooler, so you get some relief. But if they shut the windows,
I've often wondered too that with the doors as they're placed in that central hallway, was that kind of an air conditioning system, so to speak?
It had to have been, because that's like that in the house now, that's like a wind tunnel.
Yeah.
Because the door now, those doors don't seal real well. So did the family have that same issue? I don't know. But that goes back to, if you look at, and that's a good point. You never really gave that a whole lot of thought, but if you look at barns from that time period, barn doors generally, and the Johnston barn is the same way, they have doors that open on the east and the west so that they could winnow the wheat in the barn, because you got the breeze blowing from west to east, and you get the same thing in the house. So
kind of central air conditioning way back
and
when.
it was central because it's right in the middle of the house. So yeah, that would give them some relief, but it's a whole different lifestyle.
What about the holidays at the house? What I think with like lights and Christmas trees and wreaths and things but I would guess that the Johnstons probably never had a Christmas tree.
Well, don't know, because with John being Episcopalian, and that's one of the things we talk about, is where did some of our Christmas traditions come from? The Episcopalian tradition was to bring greenery into the house. Now the Christmas tree, I think was more, from the German side, and John
Right.
being, Scot-Irish, I don't know how much of that he would have been familiar with, although when he came to the United States, he settled in Pennsylvania, so he would have been around that German background there with the Pennsylvania Dutch. So he would have likely seen Christmas trees. But greenery coming into the house, that would have been common. And one of the things we do know is, with Johnston having about 250 acres here, he had his own trees on the property, so he could bring his own greenery in. But some places, even as early as 200 years ago, you start to see in cities, you start to see Christmas tree lots show up in towns.
Huh.
Because if you live, say you live in Philadelphia, and you want to bring greenery into your house, and you don't have a pine tree on your property, what are you going to do?
Right.
You know, you go pilfer off your neighbors, I suppose, if they've got a pine tree. But I don't think George was there 200 years ago. Although I did notice last night a lot of his trees are already gone.
Yeah, he's really pretty well sold out. So
that was a side trip.
Yes.
Thanks, Joe. Now where was I? But you know, you'd have to go buy your greenery, and you know, holly and ivy were plants that were brought in because they had significance to the holiday season. Of course, you know, everybody's familiar with mistletoe. So, you know, those would have been, you know, those are plants that have a long history as a part of the holiday tradition. You know, we were talking about the other night, you know, we've got one of the Christmas trees we have in the house has the little candles on it. And from what I've read is they maybe light the candles on a Christmas tree once. You know, otherwise,
poof.
And somebody would have to be there with it.
And a bucket of water, I'm
so,
sure.
You know, that would have been, you know, did John have a Christmas tree? I don't know.
Yeah.
And, you know, we decorate the house probably as what we picture a historical Christmas to be. You know, I don't necessarily know that, you know, John would have seen the way we decorate it. So, you know, we make some concessions, although by the time you got to the Victorian era, which of course would have been past John,
right,
you would have seen more of the decorations like what we had in the house. It would have been used a lot of natural stuff, so it would have been different. Christmas Day for the family, we know from their letters, a lot of times was spent, you know, going to church in the morning, spending time there, then coming home, having your Christmas meal, and likely you had visitors in and out as people you know, visited, and you likely visited neighbors. Of course, you know, not that there would have been a lot of neighbors around where Johnston lived, but you know, so you would see that sort of thing, you know, going on, you know, during the holidays. So it's different than what we picture Christmas to be. One of the things we talk about too, of course, now this would predate Johnston coming out here to the west, was not everybody in early America celebrated Christmas.
right.
You know, when John came to this country, as a boy, he came when Charles II was King of England, and Charles II had decreed that everybody in England would celebrate Christmas, so he was used to that. And the southern colonies, which were primarily that era of colonists, came to America celebrating Christmas, so he saw that in the southern colonies, Virginia and South. But when you get into New England, you know, you get the Puritan influence, and the Puritans didn't celebrate Christmas because they viewed that as a pagan holiday.
Right.
They celebrated Thanksgiving with some fervor. But then you get into the middle colonies, and I've made the statement to people before that the middle colonies must have been the politicians of America, because they looked to the south and they saw Christmas being celebrated. They looked to the north and they saw Thanksgiving. They said, well, heck, we'll do both. So Johnston would have come celebrating, you know, Christmas. So that would have been something they would have been used to.
Here's another thought for you, Andy.
Another one today?
Well, 2 in a day. That's pretty miraculous
Well,
for me.
I'm lucky if I get one. I like to write them down or share them with somebody.
Yeah,
So,
I forget to write them down, then I can't remember
sorry.
what I thought. So, out, you know, being at the farm and the canal and all, what happened to the canal in wintertime?
Well, what happened to the canal in wintertime is what usually happens to water in wintertime. It would freeze up. And that was obviously one of the challenges with the whole canal system in Ohio, was the fact that, you know, you couldn't travel year round. But another kind of a side business from the canal era was was cutting ice and putting ice in an ice house for the summer. And we talk about climate changes and those sorts of swings in climate. Obviously, this winter we're in the middle of right now kind of a warm stretch.
El Nino is struck.
El Nino's, and we've got fancy names for this stuff now. But when John was alive, we see that he wrote more than once in his diaries that it had been a warm winter and they hadn't been able to cut ice. And that was critical for a family.
Yes.
At that point in time to be able to cut ice and store ice for summer. And in the spring house, John had a little ice house. Where we a couple of years ago when we did the cold water challenge.
Oh yes, that was.
That was a little brisk, but that room, if you look at the way that room was built, you've got the real thick stone walls.
Right.
You've got a stone floor in the middle, and the water running around it. That was where he would put ice during the wintertime and store that and keep, that would help keep things cool. And he said, I don't know what we're going to do this year because we haven't been able to do that yet. So that was a kind of a side business. I've got a picture from down around Middletown of ice being cut and run up into a big commercial ice house. So that was a bit, that was a real business. And north of us, if people go up 66, we'll take a side trip here for a minute. If you go up 66, as you get before you come into Fort Loramie, I think it's before you come into Fort Loramie, if you notice on the right, once you've passed the country concert, if you notice on the right, there's a road over there called Basinburg Road. Mm-hmm. Well, and if you look down to your left, there's some ponds down in there. Those were ice ponds.
Okay.
They were basins that were created partly with canal water. So, that's where ice ponds were, that they cut ice for summer. So there would have, someplace up in there would have been some ice houses. So, they used, they took advantage of the weather. And you see pictures too, especially in towns like in Piqua. It would have been, think about the ice skating rink that you had built in there.
Boy, that's for sure.
When you get this long stretch between locks that you could skate on. That's one of the questions we get asked up here is, well, why don't we ice skate on the canal down here? Reason we don't is there's 7 or 8 springs as you go through, and I've never seen, I don't think I've ever seen the canal completely frozen from our lock down to the boathouse, because the springs are always running, because the springs run about 55 degrees year round.
Right.
And so, in the summertime or in the spring when we got it, that water was cold. But if you were in that water in the winter, that water would feel warm.
Yes.
So that you get that flowing, that little bit of a flow on the water. So this stretch of canal doesn't freeze, or doesn't freeze from bank to bank and freeze solid. So. That was a recreation in the wintertime to ice skate, and I'm sure if probably down in the library there's likely some postcards of people ice skating on the canal.
Yeah, there were some pictures. I know there was one that stands out, that there was some kind of a race they had from the south end of Piqua to Troy on the ice as an ice skating event. I thought, that'd be a long pole from Piqua to Troy.
And that would be
ice
interesting too, because between Lock 9 and Piqua and Troy, you've got 2 locks you had to negotiate.
Right.
So that would have been that would have been interesting to see how how they dealt with Lock 10 and 11. Because Lock 10 was right where Peterson Road crosses, right. And then Lock 11 was down by the elevator.
Okay.
So you got 2 locks in there before you get to the Troy Town lock, which is no longer there.
Yes, the blocks are still there. But
But yeah, that was great fun. Ice skate in the wintertime. And because a lot of people don't think about the canal didn't really separate things, but that was a connector. You know, that was the way people, you know, connected with each other and shared information. And, you know, they traveled up and down, you know, not just by canal boat, but you see pictures of rowboats and things like that being used on the canal. So that was a long answer, wasn't it?
it was.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That kept it going, so to speak. And I can't think of any other good questions here. I can't imagine. I guess again my mind starts wandering. I think John Johnson and probably the boys. Man, the hay probably would have frozen, together and separating that stuff. The grain gets wet and freezes together. And
yeah, and that barn isn't all that big, to maintain the hay and things that they would have needed. So, would it have been kept outside, or a lot of things we don't know.
Right.
We know that on one side of the barn there's stalls for animals. And that would have been, that was reconfigured based on the work that they did as the barn was dismantled and rebuilt. So, you don't think about that stuff so much today. But yeah, things would have, winter would have been a tough time for the family.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad I didn't live then. I guess I'd have probably whined a great deal.
And people have asked about, what kind of help would the family have had. We know that John's wife Rachel talks about having help with a young girl from town. So now, we're 3 miles or so away from town. Today that doesn't seem like a great distance, but when the family lived out here, would that young girl from town have lived with them? I can't imagine her commuting back and forth every day.
Yeah, even riding a horse, that's a pretty good trip.
So, but we know that Rachel had help. And I suspect that Rachel probably was likely a pretty tough taskmaster. Easy for me to say. I imagine she knew exactly what she wanted. And I don't know how long somebody would work for them. What would be really interesting is if one of those young girls from town had kept a diary.
Right.
Of what it would have been like to work for the Johnstons. And also, because of John's federal service, he also was allotted so much to pay for some help out here. So there would have been some help on the property. Now, the question has always been, where did they stay? Okay, did they stay in the spring house? Because you've got that upper floor that would have been pretty good size. Or did they stay, the third floor of the farmhouse was occupied. It was finished. Or did they stay in the third floor of the house? But we know that they had help. We know that, during harvest season, John had help. Of course, he also had the family to help as well. But so this would have been a place where there'd been, a lot of activity, a lot of people would have been here. And during the agency time, you'd had people in and out all the time. This would have been a
pretty busy place.
It's been a busy place.
Like.
Now, it would not have been as busy in the wintertime because people would not have been traveling.
Right.
We don't today. We don't think much about winter. Doesn't slow us down much in our travel.
Right.
We pretty much still just go and do what we're going to do. But in those days, especially with the native population, winter was sort of a time to hole up a little bit. You went out, you left your central village, and you went out into individual sort of family hunting camps, and you did your hunting and trapping for the winter to get ready for the spring trade. So, in terms of agency stuff, this would have been probably a little quieter. But still would have been a tough time to exist out here.
Yeah, I guess just, look at the pictures and come out here during the nice weather and stuff, and you just think, oh, wouldn't that have been great to sit on the back porch and just kind of overlook everything and how pretty it is and how calm and peaceful. And then you think December, January, February, March even maybe, that it could have been a pretty treacherous place to be.
Well, and we even out here this time of year, if it snows, we say, boy, this is really pretty out here. I can imagine Johnson saying, oh, crud, it snowed again. Or he'd have some other expletive of some sort.
That's true. He may have had a bit of a different...
oh, shucky darn gee whiz golly. Or something.
That's better. That's more like he would have said.
But, yeah, you're right. We look at it, oh, gosh, that's pretty nice, and then we plow it and go on. But they didn't have that opportunity or that luxury. So it would have been an interesting time.
It would have been, yeah, and especially looking back from our perspective, that it couldn't have been a fun time to be doing things by any means.
No, a lot different, a lot different time, and it is hard, like you said, from our perspective, looking back. We say, gee, many they had it tough, but you've turned that lens around and look from, say Johnston's parents' time up to when John was living here, and they would have probably said, son, you've got it pretty good. So it's all a matter of where you are in time, and it is a matter of perspective. But those are questions we get asked a lot, and it was a kind of neat to kind of talk about that a little bit today, and maybe that helps people, appreciate, what we have today, and of course, different time, a lot different lifestyles. So.
That's true. That's true. But I don't know where we're at as far as our director, giving us any advice here on things, but it looks like it might be time from the old clock on the wall to kind of wrap this up for this year. And
yeah, we'll be back. I think what we're going to, we've kind of talked a little bit as we get into January, February, March. I think what we'd like to do a little bit is start to introduce people to a little bit more about a background about the Friends, about some of the activities that the Friends Council does. I think we'll bring some board members in and let them talk so people can start to see and put faces with what's going on out here, because we still get the questions about the organization and all this sort of stuff. So I think come January, February, March, we'll spend some time and explain some of those things. So.
I just thought of another thing. What a great Christmas gift for that person that you can't think, what would they really enjoy and appreciate, and what would be something nice that they could appreciate all year long?
The gift of history.
The gift of history.
Absolutely.
A Friends membership.
Yes, thank you.
They come to the farm all summer, every day.
That's
if they
right.
want to.
They can
We're
come
open.
out and obviously a Friends membership gets you free admission every day. You can ride a canal boat as many times as you want. Some discounts in the gift shop, discounts to our reservation events, a little bit of notice about some of the things that are coming up. So yeah, it's a good way. It's a nice stocking stuffer.
Exactly. That's. I thought you got one more thing you'd like to get somebody. Here's a great family gift.
And we'd be happy. We'd be more than happy to do that. Give us a call out here at 773-2522, and we would be glad to stuff your stocking.
And what a great way to do it.
Absolutely, and support the Johnston farm in the process.
Exactly. Well, I guess it's time to kind of wrap things up for the year.
I think so. It's been fun. It's always fun. It's always kind of sad to see another year wrap up, and you think about all the things we talked about this past year. And we thank people that have been watching faithfully, and we're glad to take them around the farm.
That's right. And we hope they have a good holiday season and a Merry Christmas.
And a safe and prosperous holiday season and New Year's.
And the one person we don't want to leave out as we wrap up the year is the world famous director, producer,
cameraman,
soundman,
cinematographer.
Ooh,
you like that word?
Yes. But of course we can't ever forget, humble as heck,
and just an all-around nice guy.
Mr.
Oh,
Joe
yeah,
Teach.
Joe, I guess we need to mention who he is too,
That's
don't
true.
we?
Well, I think probably the times we've been on and mentioned him, that people probably just know that Joe is back there doing all this great work, and that's why we can.
We owe all of this to Joe Teach.
That's right.
So I guess we'll see people in January as we go around the farm next year.